Okay, so we're going to do a couple of the problems in this last grouping. And these arguments of Lewis Carroll, basically transitive, using a transitive property, which I will demonstrate here in the simplest case. So if you have if P then Q, and if Q then R, and if R then S, notice how these have the last term here is equal to the first term there. And so we can make the conclusion here that if P then S. And in these problems, basically, it doesn't necessarily give it as, it may not give it in this order. So one thing you can do is rearrange them. And the other thing is you can use the contrapositive, which is a contrapositive, for example, of this statement, is you switch R and Q and you make them negatives. So that's what a contrapositive is. So if these didn't match up, if you couldn't order them, then you sometimes can use the contrapositive to accomplish your goal. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at problem 49, which we have statement P, which the statement is, it is a duck. Q is, it is my poultry. R is an officer, and S is one is willing to waltz. So what we're going to do, first thing you have to just convert them to if-then statements. So if you have no ducks are willing to waltz, so if you were to put this in an if-then statement, you would say if you are a duck, then you are not willing to waltz. So it would be, let's write it down. If one is a duck, so say if one is a duck, then one is not willing to waltz. Okay, so now we go to the descriptions. P is, it is a duck, which is the same as one is a duck. So the first statement would be P, and the second statement would be one is not willing to waltz. Well, we have one is willing to waltz, so in this case we would have then the negation of S. Okay. P is one is a duck, or it is a duck. If it is a duck, then one is not willing to waltz. Okay, so that's correct. No officers ever declined to waltz. So another way of doing this, you would say if one is an officer, then one is willing to waltz. So that's the same thing. No officers ever declined to waltz. If one is an officer, then one is willing to waltz. So they will waltz. So looking up at the descriptions, an officer, one is an officer, which is R. If one is an officer, then one is willing to waltz, which is S. So it's if R, then S. Statement C is all my poultry are ducks. Okay, so if you are a duck, then you are poultry. If one is a duck, then one is poultry. So now we go look. P is, it is a duck. So one is a duck. That's the same thing. If P, then one is poultry. It is my poultry. So we have if P, then Q. Now, is that true? All my poultry are ducks. So actually I have that the wrong way around. So if you are poultry, so if it is my poultry, if it is my poultry. So that was kind of one of those other versions that I did, which could make sense, but doesn't agree exactly with what I have. So if it is my poultry, then it is a duck. So it's actually the other way around. If Q, then P. And remember, if you switch those two, what's that called? It's called the converse. So I did the converse. I said, if it is a duck, then it is poultry. But in this case, all my poultry. Since it's my poultry, I have to do that. If it is my poultry, then it is a duck. So it seems like it's saying the same thing, but it's not saying exactly the same thing. Okay, so these are the three statements. The question is, give a conclusion that yields a valid argument. So you have to use this chain thing. And typically, you look for the item that is only mentioned one time. So we've got Q mentioned one time. We have P mentioned 2 times. We have S mentioned 2 times. We have R mentioned once. So the question is, do we start it with Q or do we start it with R? So let's just think about this. Let's try it out start it with Q first. So if we have if Q, then P. And then we can go here, we have if P, then not S. And to match this up, we have to have a not S part here. So we have to have not S here. So how do we do that? Well, the contrapositive is equivalent. So if we took this statement here and we switched them and made them negations, and we have not S, if not S, then not R. So this is the original statement. This is the contrapositive. So those are equivalent statements because they have the same truth table. So we can do that. And so through that you can say if Q, then not R, because these intermediate ones kind of even really cancel out, but they follow. Let's do the other one. Let's try this. If R, then S. Okay. We'd have to take the contrapositive of that one, which would be S. If S, then not P. So let's do that. If S, then not P. And then this one wouldn't work out because we need P here and we need it not, so we do the contrapositive of that one, which would be if not P, then not Q. So if we do that, we get if not P, then not Q. So we have the final thing is if R, then not Q. So how do these two compare? Well, they're the contrapositive of each other. If I took the contrapositive of this, I'd switch them and make them negations. So if you switch them, you get not if not R, then Q, and the other way would be to do it. So we would take R, if R, then not Q, which is exactly the same. So it doesn't really matter which way we do it. We're going to have basically the same conclusion. So we can pick either one of them. And so the one I'm going to pick is I'm going to pick which one? I'm going to pick this one here. So what that says is it says if you are, let's see, R is an officer. If you are one of my officers, then we have the negation of Q, then you are not poultry. And another way of kind of going the opposite direction here to go to one of these kinds of statements is you would say none of my officers, make sure I'm doing this the right way, yeah, just to make sure I do this right. Because I'm trying to decide whether it's none of my officers are poultry, or if you are none of my poultry is an officer. So I would think it would be none of my officers are poultry. And the book actually has none of my officers, none of my poultry are officers. So I'm trying to reconcile that if it's the same thing. None of my poultry are officers, none of my officers are poultry. If you're one of my officers, then you are not poultry. So I'm just going to pause it for a second here and think about this for a second. Okay, so what actually the book did was use this one instead of that one. So if you were to do that, if we were to use this, where am I? Down here. So if we did that, you would say, if you are poultry, or what do we say? My poultry. If you are my poultry, then you are not one of my officers. And from that you would say, none of my poultry are officers. Okay. None of my poultry are officers. So they're basically the same thing. They're the contrapositive of each other. Okay, so that's how that works. Let's do another one. Let's pick number 52. So P is, let P be, it is a guinea pig. Q, B, it is hopeless ignorant of music. R, B, it keeps silent while the Moonlight Sonata is being played. And S, B, it appreciates Beethoven. Okay, so we start with the first one. So we have the statement, so let's say this is A, which it is. Nobody who really appreciates Beethoven fails to keep silent while the Moonlight Sonata is being played. So what we're doing here is we have to write that as an if-then statement. So nobody who really appreciates Beethoven fails to keep silent while let's look at what are the statements here. is hopelessly ignorant fails to keep silent. Oh, keep silent, fails to keep silent. Okay. So what do you really appreciate? So one, if, we got to do the if statement. Yes, these are not so easy. So again, we're trying to write this as an if-then statement. I'm trying to hesitate from looking in the book to the answer. So let me put a pause here so I can think about this. And I promise I'm not cheating. I'm just going to think about it. Okay, so this is what I came up with. If one appreciates Beethoven, then one keeps silent while the Moonlight Sonata is being played. And it kind of makes sense that somebody who appreciates the music would keep silent. They wouldn't hoop and holler. You know, it's not graduation ceremonies or anything like that. It's somebody who appreciates them. They're going to listen. Okay. So based on that if-then statement, we would do if S, then R. Okay, so that's the equivalent situation. Okay, so let's write B down. Guinea pigs are hopelessly ignorant of music. I'll spell guinea right here. Okay, so let's look at it. If we have to put if statement. If one is a guinea pig, this one's a little easier. The last one was hard because it had the never statement in there. If one is a guinea pig, then one is hopelessly ignorant of music. Then one is hopelessly ignorant of music. Okay, so again, we can look at it. P is a guinea pig. So if P, then Q, because Q is hopelessly ignorant. So that's the next part. Okay, let's go on to C. Yeah, I needed to pause it. I don't like this pressure on me. This pressure to come up with ideas when it actually takes a little thinking. Okay, so no one, that's one of those no one things. No one who is hopelessly ignorant of music. No one who's hopelessly ignorant ever keeps silent while the Moonlight Sonata is being played. Just put MS for Moonlight Sonata. So what you would say is that if one is hopelessly ignorant of music, then they do not keep silent. Okay. So if one is hopelessly ignorant of music, then one will not stay silent. With MS playing. Okay, so that's the if-then statement. If one is hopelessly ignorant of music, it is hopelessly ambiguous. The music is Q, and then 1 will not stay silent. Well, R is it keeps silent, so this is going to be not R. So it's if Q, then not R. Okay, so let's write these three statements down on a separate thing. So we have Q, if Q, then not R. We have if P, then Q. And finally we had if S, then R. So now we're trying to string these together to come up with some valid conclusion. And again, we look for the case of where we have the letter just one time, which is P and S. So again, we can choose either one, and let's choose P for guinea pigs. So we're going to start off with if P, then Q. Then we can stick on if Q, then not R. So we have those two, and then we have finally this one. But this one, we have R. We need not R to string it. So we're going to take the contrapositive, which switches them and makes them negative. So if not R, then not S. So now we can put that in there. If not R, then not S. And then we have this transitive property. So the final conclusion is if P, then not S. So once we've done that symbolic logic, we go back and plug in the results. So if 1 is a guinea pig, then, okay, the negation of S is then 1 does not appreciate, then 1 does not appreciate Beethoven, which is probably a pretty good statement. And if we wanted to rewrite this in another form, we'd say, you know, no guinea pigs appreciate Beethoven. I think that would be, or guinea pigs don't appreciate Beethoven. So let's put that in there. Guinea pigs don't appreciate Beethoven. And so that would be the final conclusion based on this particular sequence of conjectures or premises. So that's kind of how it works. So what you do is you take the original statement and you rewrite it as an if-then statement. You come up with a symbolic logic version of it based upon what the statements are defined as. You do that for each one. Then you list all three of them. Then you see, okay, is there any order that I can put them in? So you look for the ones, the statements that involve only where the thing is mentioned one time. So in this case, P is mentioned one time, and S is mentioned one time. We'll do the other one just in a second. Let's go ahead and do so. Anyway, we pick P, if P then Q, then we look to see if we can find that if Q then something. So we found one, if Q then something. We got to this point, we said, well, we don't have the negation of R, so we have to use the contrapositive to get that over there and make it not. And so when you take the contrapositive, you get not, if not R, then not S. And then we use the transitive property to get the final conclusion, which was if P, then not S. And then you go back from symbolic logic to the sentences and write the statement. So let's just look at the other case where if we started with if S, then R, well, the next thing we'd have to do is we'd have to have R something here. And we don't have that, so we take this one and we take the contrapositive of that, which would be if R, then not Q. Okay, then we say, okay, do we have not Q? Well, we don't. But if we take the contrapositive of that, we get if not Q, then not P. So we put that in there, if not Q, then not P. And now we have these alternating things, so the final conclusion would be if S, then not P. And how would we write that? Well, let's add another page so we can write that out. So S is if one appreciates Beethoven, then one is not a guinea pig. And again, notice that these two solutions are contrapositive with each other. You switch them and then you do the negations, and they're equivalent statements. And the way you would write this is you'd say nobody who appreciates Beethoven is a guinea pig. So we've taken it from a if-then statement into just more of a statement. Nobody who appreciates Beethoven is a guinea pig. Okay, so that's it. And turn the recording off.